Yo guys, what is up? Max for Diablo 4 video, and today we're talking about what I expect to be the best builds on each class going into the season. Now, the point of this video isn't to make a tier list, it's to give you an idea of what builds are going to be strong and help you make an informed decision about what class you plan on playing Season 1 with. We're going to be talking about what builds are still really strong after the nerf apocalypse that happened, and what builds are going to have really strong synergies with the new hearts, and what hearts are going to be paired with each of these builds. I hope you guys enjoy the video. I hope you find it informative. Let's get right into it. So to start us off, we're going to be talking about the best builds for Sorcerer. Now, on screen, you can see the best builds for Sorcerer. And now we're going to be talking about the Barbarian. Just kidding. Sorcerer is still going to be fine. Yes, it did lose a lot of damage, but with the new hearts, there are going to be some neat, interesting synergies. So to start us off, Ice Shards and Blizzard are still going to be good builds. Those are probably the top builds for Sorcerer. Those should still be dealing pretty decent damage, and they've got some synergies with the new hearts. What I want to talk to you about today, though, is an interesting new synergy with one of the new hearts that could enable a build that probably most of you haven't tried yet. So Frozen Orb was honestly pretty solid before all of these nerfs. It's obviously worse now with the nerfs, but it's going to have an interesting synergy with the new hearts. So there is a new heart for Sorcerer that is a Sorc specific heart that is going to allow you to cast multiple casts of any of your projectile skills, Frozen Orb being included, at the cost of using all of your mana. So obviously, mana being an issue on Sorc, that isn't great. However, there is an avalanche passive for Sorcerer, which is going to give you free casts of Frozen Orb. So now we have free casts of Frozen Orb. We're doing a ton of them. And we're also going to use the aspect, or the new heart, where when you are healthy, you're actually going to consume health to cast skills as opposed to your mana. So this could give us free casts of a bunch of Frozen Orbs all at the same time, while also costing health instead of mana. And then we would also use the new Talrasha aspect. This is going to give us 36% increased damage overall for all of our things, because on Frozen Orb, we're going to be using Firebolt to light enemies on fire. We've got Cryo with the Frozen Orb, and when we're teleporting in on enemies, we've got Shock. That is another 30% overall, 36% overall damage for the build. And we could pair things like the regen on killing burning enemies, the aspect of the Umbral, and we put it on our ring, then we're going to be getting a ton of mana regen, and we could end up with a Frozen Orb Sorc build that is doing these big AoE blasts with Frozen Orb, and also not costing us very much mana. Could be very interesting. I still think Ice Shards and Blizzard are still going to be the top, but there is potential for some new build diversity on the Sorcerer class. Now, the Barbarian got hit hard with a lot of the nerfs. The Barbarian gets 4 weapons, and on those 4 weapons, we were always going in crit invulnerable, which now got nerfed a ton, so the Barbarian is hitting significantly less damage. On top of that, they nerfed our cooldowns, they nerfed our survivability, they nerfed Hoda, and we didn't get much love in return for all of those nerfs. However, there is a really unique, interesting synergy with Whirlwind. Now, Whirlwind didn't get changed, obviously. It got impacted by the general changes to the Barbarian, but Bleed Whirlwind in testing is still hitting really hard, and there's going to be a new synergy. Now, one of the new hearts is going to give us, the Creeping Death Heart, is going to give us 40% increased damage over time per CC that we have on an enemy. That is not very great on a Barbarian who doesn't have a lot of sources of CC. However, what I'm theory crafting is that the Barbarian is going to be using the Butcher's Cleaver. The Butcher's Cleaver actually just got buffed. It's going to give us a 75% slow on critical lucky hit, which it has a 100% chance, if we lucky hit when it critically strikes, to give us a slow and a fear on enemies. That is 2 CCs, and those 2 CCs will translate to 80% damage over time on enemies. On top of that, we've got a new aspect that whenever we get close to enemies, we've got stun on them. We've got another aspect that's going to give us stuns on bleeding enemies, and just the amount of CC that we're going to be able to put on enemies with the Butcher's Cleaver, which I would never use ever, is going to stack up to at least 120% damage over time on enemies, which should skyrocket the damage of Bleed. Bleed was already pretty good before. A lot of players are using Bleed to kill Uber Lilith on Barbarian, and the fact that we've got another thing that's not only going to give us damage to mobs, but it also is going to work against staggered bosses, which all of the CC is going to help us stagger bosses, could lead to a really powerful Bleed Whirlwind build, dealing way higher bleed damage than we saw actually prior to all the nerfs. So I'm really excited to try that out. Another interesting build that could be really strong for Barbarian in Season 1 is actually Double Swing. Now, double swing's always been pretty good for Nightmare Dungeon pushing. It does insane single target damage, and that is kind of the big downfall of double swing, is that it's just really good at single target damage. It doesn't have great clear, and for hunting elites, it feels very good, but for like general content and clearing out things, it can feel a lot slower than some of the other barbarian builds. Now, that is kind of getting fixed with some of the hearts. To start us off, there's going to be the new heart, the Barber heart, that when we critically strike an enemy, we basically store damage on them, and then that enemy explodes and that damage to nearby enemies. Double swing being one of the hardest hitting skills already for Barbarian could mean that you could theoretically double swing into packs and kill whole packs with just one cast of double swing. In addition to that, we could pair the Tempting Fate and Focus Rage hearts, which are going to give us 60% more crit damage with double swing. And whenever we spend like 100 to 200 Fury, our next attack is going to be getting 30% more crit chance. We could buff up the crit chance, the crit damage of it, and then when we're critting, we're making enemies explode, which could lead to double swing being a really, really strong setup for Season 1. Next up, we've got the Necromancer. Now, the Necromancer's best build, in my opinion, for Season 0 was Bone Spear, and Bone Spear is still going to be really strong. I think there's going to be a lot of new variety for the Necromancer, particularly in Season 1. You've got new aspects for your Dark Dots to deal more damage. We've got a new aspect for Bloodlance, and Bloodlance could be popping off. Minion builds are going to be really neat with the new aspect, or the new heart that's going to give you 75% more damage for your minions. But I still think that Bone Spear might be one of the strongest builds, particularly with these new heart combinations. So Bone Spear did get nerfed. It's still killing Uber Lilith. It's still nuking dungeons. And the new aspects that we can pair with Bone Spear, to start us off, we've got the Barber. The Barber is whenever we crit enemies, we're going to store damage on them and then they explode. That is going to lead to even bigger damage pumps when we use Corpse Tendril to pull in enemies. We're going to Corpse Tendril, pull in enemies, crit them with Bone Spear. That damage is going to get stored and then explode if they didn't already die, and you're going to be nuking packs with that. In addition, we can pair that with the Sacrilegious Heart, which is going to give our corpse skills a free cast whenever we walk near a corpse. Now, I'm not sure if this will work with cooldown or not. If it doesn't work with cooldown, you're going to be constantly casting Corpse Tendrils for free, which would be insane. I kind of doubt that works, but it could still work with the Corpse Explosion, which would give us really great Essence regen, which is going to be really important because we're also going to be using the Great Feast, which is going to give us 75% increased damage. That damage comes at a cost. We are going to be draining essence, 5 essence per second, and Bone Spear scales off of essence. So having a free corpse explosion to give us essence could be really nice and help the build sustain and keep up with some insane damage levels. The build that I'm personally most excited for on the Necromancer, just because I'm not huge onto minions, is the new Bloodlance setup that's going to be possible. Now, we just got the Gore Quills aspect, which reads, Bloodlance will consume blood orbs to also conjure lances from them. Each additional blood lance deals 20 to 50% of normal damage and prioritizes targeting unlanced enemies. This is going to allow our blood orbs to spawn blood lances. In addition to that, we've got the aspect of the Embalmer. Consuming a corpse has a 20 to 30% chance to spawn a blood orb. So we've got our corpses spawning blood orbs, those blood orbs spawning blood lances, and with the Sacrilegious aspect, we're going to be corpse exploding automatically. This is the aspect that when we get near a corpse, we trigger a free corpse skill, aka Corpse Explosion, which is going to be consuming those corpses, spawning blood orbs, and we're going to basically just be walking through corpses where blood lances are going to be basically automated for us, which sounds crazy to me. In addition to that, we could use the Great Feast, which is going to give us 75% increased damage, but drain our essence. But we're going to be consuming so many corpses that we shouldn't really have issues with essence drain. We could use the Barber Heart to give us even more like crowd AoE damage when enemies that get critically struck by our blood lances are going to explode. And we could also use the Blood Artisan's Cuirass to cast free Bone Spirits, which would help with the single target damage of blood lance after we pick up a blood orb. And if those blood orbs are getting consumed by the new Sacrilegious Heart that's going to be activating those things, we could be spawning Bone Spears or Bone Spirits and blood lances for free. And then we could also use the aspect of the Potent Blood. I'm assuming this might work. While at full life, blood orbs grant essence. If those blood orbs that are turning into blood lances count as using those blood orbs, then we're going to be constantly getting essence as well. The whole build could be very synergistic, basically automated bone spears and blood orbs flying around as you're moving around. Obviously, this is all theory crafted and could not work, but if that does work, that could lead to a really, really unique build for the Necromancer. Next up, we've got the Druid class. Now, I think the Druid is going to be one of the strongest, if not the strongest character for Season 1. A lot of the Druid's best builds, Tornado, Bulwark, Lightning Storm, and even Shred is still pretty good, are all going to be great. The Druid's got a ton of build diversity. The biggest nerf to the Druid was that we only get Unstoppable in Grizzly Rage for 6 seconds, which really hurts Storm Wolf builds. However, we are getting a new heart called the Unconstrained Beast. When you're hit with a stun, freeze, or knockdown effect, there's a 40 to 60% chance to automatically activate Grizzly Rage for 3 seconds. Now, a ton of testing needs to be done on this aspect because if the aspect or this heart procs and then it extends Grizzly Rage, allowing us to stack up even more crit damage in it, that would be insane. If it refreshes our Unstoppable procs, that would be insane. But it could also refresh Grizzly Rage and take away all of the crit damage that we've been stacking in it. If it's not proccing enough and you're intentionally walking into stun, freezes, or knockdowns, you're just going to die because you should be avoiding those things and you're going to have to actually walk into them to proc this thing. I just don't know if this is going to be good or not, but it could be the solution to the big Grizzly Rage nerf. Now, the build that I'm most personally excited to try on the Druid is the Lightning Storm build paired with the new hearts. Now, one of the new hearts is called the Pakana, and it reads, critically strikes electrically charge the enemy for up to 2.5 seconds, causing lightning to arc between them and any other charged enemies, dealing lightning damage. Now, this heart is pretty interesting because it's not going to work on skills that only hit single enemies. For example, this only chains to enemies that are already charged. So it's only going to work on skills that are already hitting a ton of enemies. And Lightning Storm is one of these skills that hits the absolute most enemies. You're going to be charging whole packs. You're going to be sending out all that lightning between all the enemies and causing lightning arcs between all of them. This is going to be a really cool aspect for like possibly Whirlwind, Tornado, but I think it's going to really shine on Lightning Storm because of just the amount of AoE that Lightning Storm covers, and it can basically guaranteed critical strike. Would be really interesting. On top of that, we can use the Barber Heart, which is going to give our critical strikes stored damage on enemies, and then they're going to explode, which is going to make Lightning Storm even stronger of a mobbing machine. And we can use the Unconstrained Beast heart that I was just talking about to give us free procs of Grizzly Rage, possibly improving our survivability, our Unstoppable, and even allowing us to stack up even more crit damage while we are playing the Lightning. This would obviously all work with the Tornado, but Tornado already shines in single target. It definitely outshines Lightning in single target, and I don't think it would work quite as well with the Pakana Lightning Chaining Heart, but Tornado is probably the Druid's strongest, if not one of the strongest builds for Druid, and it's just going to be even stronger in Season 1. The other build that I'm shocked didn't get nerfed is the Crone Bulwark build. This build uses the Crone Staff to give you free procs of Nature's Fury, which is going to give you cooldown, which refreshes Bulwark, and then you can spam Bulwark constantly, and Bulwark, they did not change the fact that it scales with barrier generation and the fact that it does more damage the healthier enemies are. Bulwark Druid was already clearing Nightmare 100 dungeons, and its biggest issue was dealing big group damage. And that is kind of getting fixed. So one of the new things that we're getting for the Druid is the Inexorable Force Heart. That's going to give us a 50 enemy pull whenever we activate our ultimate skill, which we're going to be able to do a ton on this build. And those are going to pull all those enemies to us, and then we can just Bulwark explode everything. And then we can pair that with the Barber Heart, which is going to critical strike store damage on enemies. We're going to be exploding enemies. We're going to be pulling them in. I don't know if you would use the Unconstrained Beast on Bulwark, but the synergy there could be crazy. The other two hearts that you could pair with the Bulwark build are the Lion Heart, which is going to give you more barrier damage or more barrier generation, which would lead to more damage with Bulwark, and the Revenge Heart. This is going to give you 20% damage reduction, and whenever you use a defensive skill, you explode in fire damage. Now, this fire damage is listed at 2,000 fire damage at level 20, meaning this could scale to thousands and thousands of fire damage. And if that gets your benefits from like vulnerable and if it could crit, you could do massive explosions, and you're obviously spamming your defensive bulwark a ton when you're starting out, or when you're using the like Nature's Fury setup. So you're just constantly exploding in fire and rock, and pulling enemies to you. It could be absolutely absurd. And lastly, we've got the Rogue class. Now, I think Poison Twisting Blades is going to be one of the stronger builds of the season, particularly with the new aspect. Your attacks have a 5 to 15% chance to apply all imbuement effects at 40 to 50% of normal potency. This is so insane. One, because Twisting Blades Rogue attacks very quickly. Two, there's going to be multiple aspects to scale our dots. For example, the Creeping Death aspect is going to give us more dot damage per crowd control, and we can already use traps and a bunch of crowd controls with Rogue, and Twisting Blades attacks really quickly, so you're going to be getting a lot of chances to proc all of your imbuements all the time. And then also on the Rogue, the like stacking poison with bursting venom has not been fixed yet. People are still nuking Lilith with like stacking poison damage. That's just going to be even better this season. The survivability of Rogue after the changes is definitely going to be feeling it a bit, but there's a lot of other hearts that we could be using for more survivability, and we could even put on the Barber to just nuke everything, where all of our poison damage and all of our hits are going to be stacking damage and then exploding enemies. You could probably get away without using Shadow Imbue and just using the Barber heart, and then just mainly focusing on like stacking poison damage and have the Barber be your like AoE clear. But I think Poison Twisting Rogue is going to be absolutely insane. The other build that is shaping out to be interesting, but I don't think is going to be as good as people are expecting it to be, is the Pen Shot build with the new Eagle Horn Bow. Now, the Eagle Horn Bow is a new unique that launches rogue pen shots to bounce. So now your pen shots can bounce, but it's only a chance to bounce. And from all of the gameplay that I've looked at, and I've looked pretty extensively at a bunch of different videos of people using it, it just doesn't look like it's working very well, where most of the time when it does bounce, it's missing enemies. It's a very small arrow, and it only works on the main arrow. It does not work on any of the arrows that split off. So it's just not looking very good, but in certain maps and in certain dungeon layouts, Pen Shot will probably be one of the faster clears, but on only certain layouts and particular dungeons. So Pen Shot Rogue is going to be very interesting, but obviously it's kind of like subject to like how good it actually is. With the Pen Shot build, you could use the Pekana, where your crit strikes charge enemies with electricity, and that would help even more with the AoE clear. And then we would also use the chance to apply all of our imbuements, and we could also use the Barber for even more AoE damage. The Trickery Heart is going to be an interesting one, because when you use a Subterfuge skill, you leave behind a Shadow Decoy. If that works on the free procs of getting Dark Shrouds with our Marksman skill lucky hits, that could constantly give us Shadow Decoys, which would help with survivability, but that needs to be tested. Guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Honestly, I think some of the best builds that were the best builds for Season 0 are still going to be the best builds for the different characters, just now even more powerful with hearts. I think that the Druid is going to be the best class for Season 1. Just off of these changes, I think Rogue is going to be right next to it, and then Necro probably a little bit next to both of those. Necro's survivability is definitely going to be hurting a bit with these changes. And then Barb and Sorc are behind all three of those classes. But yeah, guys, that is it for the video. I hope maybe this video inspired you to maybe try something new or come up with some new synergies for these new hearts and these new builds. I will catch y'all in the next one, guys. Take care. Peace.